what day is it? Tuesday, January
Tuesday.
26th. Amy and Simi here. Yeah, I only know the days of the week because of, okay, we have Man Crush Monday, we have Director Tuesday. That's how I keep track of my days. But we are happy to be here. We will be talking about director Terry Gilliam, one of my favorites. In particular, his one of his most well-known films, Brazil. But before that, let's talk about yesterday's film and Man Crush Monday. Yesterday we talked about the absolutely incredible Vincent Price. Still can't do his voice. I don't know what I was saying.
Yes, it's very difficult, I tell you.
That was better. That's better. Theater of Blood, which, oh my God. Yeah, let's talk about this movie.
Isn't this movie fun?
It is fun. And it started off a little slow to me, but the murders just like keep topping themselves and they get so absurd. Yeah, it was
but
great.
Also, I feel like, I don't know if I would agree that it starts slow, because it does start immediately with a gruesome murder. Right off the bat.
Standards for murders, Samir. We know this, okay?
Oh, that murder was pretty... I thought it was so good because there's the element of like, they really sort of went for realistic effects on what are very disturbingly referenced to in the credits as the meth drinkers collectively.
Yeah, they're drinking this purple liquid the whole time.
Yeah, it's the purple liquid is methylated spirits. It's basically like the fuel you put in your furnace. It's been those colors and the chemicals have been added to it, basically to make it taste gross, to make it more poisonous, to make it visually obvious that you're not supposed to drink this. But people are extremely poor, and when they're extremely poor, they're addicts, they will drink anything that accomplishes the same goal. So it's kind of like wood alcohol. It's like the desperation drink. So the people who would drink this regularly would be like the most destitute, and so they really went all out on that. It's like when they bring that guy, and that guy goes into that building at the beginning, and they're like, oh, we have some squatters, you need to come and address this, and it's all totally believable, until he gets in there. Then I'm like, I would not start just poking this crowd with my umbrella and telling them to move. I don't know why the police would come get the property owner to come in and personally and try to threaten them all to whatever. But see, that scene like escalates. You think, oh, look at these like destitute, these bedraggled members of society. And then it very swiftly turns to them like just straight up like slashing him to pieces. I was just like, whoa, like, okay, I wasn't expecting for this movie to get that real with like the kill scenes. But like you said, then as you go through the movie, they're all inspired by Shakespeare plays. Mm-hmm. But then he finds this really interesting way to translate that to each person. Like, how does this death in this play, how can I use that for this critic? But it's not friendly to critics, I will tell you that. It basically, you don't feel bad for like really almost any of the critics. Because they're so, especially when you see that flashback where it's like they're sort of gleefully like egging him on because they're entertained by his sadness and desperation in that moment where they've given the award to a thinly veiled parody in description. You never see or hear the actor who won over him in this movie, but you hear him like, bemoaning that he lost this award and they gave it to this new actor because he's original. And so it's like, it sort of calls into question that whole angle of criticism by which, things that are traditional are not, anything that's not original is not good. And so they give it to someone just because they're different. And so there's like, okay, well, there's a legitimate argument to be made with those critics, but they're so pretentious and so like stuck in their ways. You're like, okay, you guys are jerks, and I really don't care if you are the victims in this story. So you get to kind of enjoy these murders in a macabre, disturbing way.
Yeah, and it was also so fun to see Vincent Price play all these different characters. Each one of his murders, he's disguised as someone else. My favorite, of course, being the gay hairdresser with an
Yes.
afro. Something I never imagined I'd see Vincent Price as.
And I love it. He even like flirts with the cop as part of his plot to get the cop to move a little further away. So he's
Mhm.
like playing it up so that the cop will like
Yeah,
be as
leave
far
this
away
woman
as
alone so he can
possible
kill her.
so he can get away with killing. And that woman he killed, I was talking to you after yesterday, that woman became the third Mrs. Vincent Price in his life. And I thought I recognized her this time around when I watched it. I'm like, she looks and her sounds very, very familiar. She is Auntie Mame's best friend in the movie Auntie Mame with
Oh.
So she's like Rosalind Russell's best friend in that movie version of Auntie Mame from the late 50s. Her friend Vera, the first lady of the American stage, is her character, whatever. And I was like, oh my God, that is her. And she married Vincent Price. It was like all these like stars flew off in my head from excitement because I was like, oh my God, worlds coming together.
Your favorite
But I
things
love this movie.
combined.
This was Vincent Price's favorite of his movies that he worked on. You get to see him also do all these Shakespearean monologues,
Yeah.
and he has a voice made for fucking Shakespeare. Like that voice is the voice I feel that you would imagine when you think of Shakespeare and hearing it in your head. You want someone this theatrical, somebody with this kind of very particular diction and the tone of his voice. There's just something about the sound of his voice. It's like I said, it's the gay nasaliness with the deep timbre, but there's also this melodious quality to it. Like he understands the melody of everything in life, it seems, when he speaks. Like, it's so special. So I'm like, oh, you get this movie where he's doing all his horror stuff. These are gruesome murders, and you're getting Shakespeare. I just love it. It's so much fun. I also love the interpretation of the Titus Andronicus murder. Like, which one? A queen is fed her two babies in a pie. Like, oh, damn! You came up with a good one for this.
Yeah, it was
that
fun.
was pretty gross murder too. But it also reminded me of a scene from Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5. Where there's a scene where somebody is like fed to death, basically, and it's like really gross. It's like you don't really like. It was one of those things like, oh, you don't see that in movies that often, and so it's like kind of a gross thing to see happen. And I'm like, oh, but just like the relish with which Vincent Price is playing this role in this movie, like it's palpable that like sense of fun and excitement is you can feel it. I just think it's such a really well-crafted movie. Like they filmed that in an actual dilapidated theater. Like before, like they discovered it and it hadn't been cleaned or renovated or anything. Like, all right, we're using this. So like, they didn't have to dress that theater to look like that. They just found one that perfectly suited what they needed. Wow. But I think it really it goes for the horror, like seriously. Like those are really gruesome scenes, but the comedy that he brings to this movie is just amazing. Also, as I watched this with a friend last night, and they were like, "Are we supposed to not recognize Diana Rigg under that cheap handlebar mustache?" And I'm like, I'm pretty sure the shape and the fakeness of the mustache is like an intentional camp element that they've incorporated for you to enjoy, because there's no way you don't recognize. She even speaks in that voice out of the drag. Out of drag, she's still using, every now and then uses that voice, and then part way through, she like goes in her normal, female presenting self to lure in one of the victims. So that she knows what's going on. She's just playing innocent for the other critic who is too stupid. He thinks he's so smart and he still holds on to it almost to the point of dying. He's still going to hold on to his pride because he thinks originality is the king of art. And I'm like, okay, you don't even realize that you're like trying to die for a concept that no serious critic would ever subscribe to, first of all. And secondly, why is your opinion on an actor worth you dying for? Just lie and get out of the damn chair so your eyes don't get gouged out by like red hot daggers. Like, I don't know why that's not in that guy's brain in that part of the movie. So you really like kind of, like,
Yeah,
oh,
I love the final joke of that critic saying something about how Vincent Price was still overacting, but he does know how to make an exit.
and he had all these amazing exit lines throughout the movie. Like, he would always have this little pun after each murder.
Yeah.
It was just, it's such a delightful, like, messed up horror film. I think he's just like at his peak in this. It's just so delightful. And of course, I also spent a lot of extra time looking up, because we were looking up his cooking things. Like, I found there people have actually put the recordings up. There's records that are like Vincent Price culinary lesson, like international cooking lesson. And it's a record, and it's him reciting these recipes to you. So he did one of like the exotic foods of the Far East, like the foods of India. There's a record of him reading off like Indian recipes. And when you even listen to that, you're like, oh my God, he literally is one of those people who could read the phone book and you just sit and listen to it. But the fact that it's like Indian things, he's like, and now I've made my own masala. And you can use black peppercorn, green cardamom. It's like, oh my God.
You need that.
I am like, I immediately have started the search for it. Anybody who can help me with that search.
Yes, we're on the prowl. We gotta get this.
Please help send me things.
Yes. Well, check out this movie if you didn't see it. It's available to rent. I rented mine on Amazon. Yeah, really fun. Just so fun. Loved it.
Andres points out the horror and the Italian macabre horror directors will go out of their way to try to find beauty and horror elements in their films. Yeah, see, I like that first. I thought it was so good because it turns on a dime. At first, you think you're just looking at like some really, really sad homeless people, and then they turn it like murderous, and it just like sort of gradually and very naturally transitions to murder before you even realize, and then it's too late. And I'm like, just well done. And of course, from one twisted, subversive, delightful treasure of cinema to another.
Terry Gilliam!
You really wanted to find a weird photo of him, didn't you?
Well, there were some great photos, and I saw this. It's like, I think this photo just sums him up. I've been a fan of Terry Gilliam films for a while now. I haven't even seen all of them. I think he's done like 11 or 12 feature films. But especially growing up on Monty Python, and if anyone, I kind of doubt it at this point, but if anyone happened to have watched my Monty Python show that I did back in like April or something, so I don't think anyone who was watching me then is watching me now as far as this goes. But I did talk about Monty Python. I picked The Life of Brian for a cult classic pick. And so I did talk a little bit about each one of the members then, but that is certainly, where he got his introduction into film. But let's talk about Terry Gilliam. He was born November 22nd, 1940 in Minneapolis. His father was a traveling salesman for Folgers. And Terry Gilliam was quite popular in high school. He was the class president and the senior prom king, voted most likely to succeed. He went to Occidental College and got a degree in political science. And this is this quote that I thought was really great. Okay, so this is I became terrified that I was going to be a full-time bomb-throwing terrorist if I stayed in the U.S. because it was the beginning of really bad times in America. It was 1966, 67. It was the first police riot in Los Angeles. In college, my major was political science, so my brain worked that way. And I drove around in this little English Hillman Minx, top down, and every night I'd be hauled over by the cops, up against the wall, and all this stuff. They had this monologue with me. It was never a dialogue. It was that I was a long-haired drug addict living off some rich guy's foolish daughter. And I said, no, I work in advertising. I make twice as much as you do, which is a stupid thing to say to a cop. And it was like an epiphany. I suddenly felt what it was like to be a Black or Mexican kid living in LA. Before that, I thought I knew what the world was like. I thought I knew what poor people were. And then suddenly it all changed because of that simple thing of being brutalized by cops. And I got more and more angry. And I just felt I've got to get out of here. I'm a better cartoonist than I am a bomb maker. That's why so much of the US is still standing.
That is probably not a mantra you want to be remembered for in this day and age.
Yeah.
I think he made that statement. When did he make that statement, actually? When did he say that?
I'm not sure.
Like,
It was with an interview with Salman Rushdie. But he was working as an animator and a cartoonist. He was working for something called Help magazine. And then that kind of went under, and he was like, well, I'm moving to England. And he moved there in the late 60s and working as part of these other, like he was working on an animated sequence for a children's series called Do Not Adjust Your Set. And that featured some of the eventual Monty Python members. So when they formed Monty Python's Flying Circus, they brought him on. For a while, he wasn't really as an official cast member. It was always just like, this is the group, and then this guy does all these crazy animated sequences in this. But eventually, he became an official cast member and had roles. Still wasn't as featured predominantly as the other guys as far as acting goes. But he is in there. I mean, he's since then he was in all of their movies. You always picture him with his little coconuts and the Holy Grail. Yeah, but just a crazy. He just seems so wild. Eventually he started getting into directing, though, especially after the or kind of during the breakup of Monty Python. Of course, after they finished the Flying Circus, they did a couple more of their films. His first film was Time Bandits, which I guess he also, I mean, he was involved, of course, in the Monty Python feature films.
Yes, he was one of the co-directors of those.
Yeah, films. But Time Bandits was his first solo project, and that came out in 1981, followed by Brazil in 85, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen in 1988, and he says that he likes doing things in trilogies. So that trilogy right there was called the Trilogy of Imagination, and then he did the Trilogy of Americana, which was The Fisher King, 12 Monkeys, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Going into the 2000s, he did things like The Brothers Grimm, which I really like. A lot of it didn't get the best reviews, but that has Heath Ledger and Matt Damon.
I enjoyed that movie also.
I think it's fun. I've always just thought it was like a fun thing.
I didn't understand why it got such bad reviews. I'm like, I don't know what exactly expected of a
maybe they were like, why
of a film of Brothers Grimm fairy tales. Like, there's not a whole lot of like historical. I mean, there's some, but it's not like you can perfectly verify where each story came from and things like that. So there's always some element of fiction involved in the story of how they got those stories from people. But I just thought it was a really fun, clever take on
it's fun.
Take on the Brothers Grimm story and the stories that they curated. I don't know. I enjoyed that too. But I always thought he was British also. Walter, I had the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, born British.
US. Yeah, born in the U.S., born American, but he became a naturalized British citizen, had dual citizenship for a while, and then as of 2006, he got rid of his U.S. citizenship.
I think he still keeps his home here because he's got a home in L.A. that he lives in a lot of the time.
Another Brothers Grimm fan.
Yeah, see, I thought the same thing. I didn't understand why people were so. Why it got bad pretty. It was not quite scathing, but it was bad enough where it seemed like it complicated his ability to just make another movie for a little while after that got a lot of recognition.
Yeah. Well, then after that, he did Tideland, which I have not seen. In 2009, he did The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, which a lot of people know is Heath Ledger's final film. And that's a crazy thing about how that ended up getting finally made. The last
Yeah.
thing he has done in 2018 was The Man Who Killed Don Quixote, which I have not seen. Also doesn't have the greatest reviews, but it looks fun. And that has Adam Driver and oh, why am I forgetting his name? The guy in today's film is going to be in it. But he's
The
just really
guy?
known for his crazy. Hmm?
I said the guy. The
The
guy who's
guy,
in
you know, the
today's
guy.
film.
Yes. But Terry Gilliam, he's definitely known, having this art background. He's known for crazy visuals, and his themes are always like really playing with your imagination. And that being said, another thing I read about him today was that he has this deep hatred of like Marvel and DC movies. Like he thinks they're ridiculous. I was like, anyway, like
Well, I mean, in some way, you can probably understand why people who may consider themselves artists of cinema would be like, I don't know how I can celebrate movies that are barely movie making at this point. It's but like the actors are doing their work that you would normally expect from an actor in a movie, but they're doing it in this vacuum with so much is done in front of green screens and without the benefit of having an environment to really interact with. And he's someone who really goes to great lengths to create those environments in his movies with tons of details for actors to really get a sense of place in. And so that's why I think maybe he doesn't like those other movies, because there's really no sense of place in any of those films. They could be anywhere. It doesn't matter where you are. It's just most of it's going to get blown up anyways. Like, so I'm like, you can understand why he would be like, God, these are terrible, but they are just money-making machines. And he wants to do something that's a little bit more than that. And sticking to his guns, he ended up creating a lot of films that are part of the language of movie culture, of American culture, in a lot of ways. Like, people know Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. They almost know it as much, the movie, as much as they know the original work. They like sort of it's hard to create something that you can associate with the original work so strongly. Whether or not you like the film, I think just culturally that's the effect that it has had. And you have to sort of acknowledge the power of any filmmaker who can do that. And he, like I said, sticking to his guns has helped him create movies that stand out from everyone else's. And he's carved out his own niche and his own voice in cinema that nobody else can really lay claim to. And really, as an artist, I don't think you can ever fault them for having accomplished that. That's a pretty great thing.
Yeah, I think when Anders here is talking about taking this stance, I mean, clearly with his films, he's not really about realism. That's not the thing. If you look it up, like he really was just like not a fan of, I think, just like the concept of a superhero in general. And it's just like, why is this a role model for kids? This is like setting the bar like too
really high.
Yeah, and he really ripped into Black Panther too. Yeah, look it up. He was just like not about superhero movies. Like, these are just absurd. Like, and,
I think it's more like a more like general philosophical perspective on things. Like, I think I forgot who we were talking about at some other point, but I remember when I brought up a story about a famous film critic whose work that I've been reading for many years, and he went to see Full Metal Jacket with Samuel Fuller. And when Samuel Fuller came out of that movie, his response was, "Great, another goddamn recruiting movie." And then, of course, Jonathan Rosenbaum, the critic, was like, "You're going to have to explain that one to me, because the movie seemed like it made war look pretty bad." And he had his own perspective as somebody who was in war, who was a war journalist, who was on the battlefield. Like, he had an experience level with war that pretty much everybody making movies about war didn't have. Like, I don't know if Stanley Kubrick ever went into battle. Like, I don't think he has a firsthand experience of that. So everything he's doing is a construction based on what he's gleaned from watching it on screens. And so he's constructing it visually with a sense of visual excitement attached to it. And it's like, okay, you're associating this adrenaline rush with the adrenaline rush of an exciting movie scene and a terrifying battle scene. Like, you're not going to really fully make your statement against war if that's what you're going for. And that was that particular filmmaker's perspective on filmmaking and how things are presented on screen and what you're teaching people with what you're putting on screen. So I still feel that you can enjoy Terry Gilliam as a filmmaker and acknowledge if you don't agree with that perspective, you can still have your opinion and still enjoy his movies. But I can understand where he's coming from, even if I am not making a statement on where I fall on that battle with him. But I hope he doesn't just draw a line in the sand for everyone to know. It's like, if you like Marvel movies, you are out.
No. But the man, he's 80 years old now. We'll see if he makes any more films.
Right. I did hear that Schindler's List,
we'll see.
The Schindler's List thing. I actually watched the interview where someone asked him about that, but I think it was for him. It was literally just, I think, the difference between a movie made by a great artist who is always worked in that kind of media and somebody who works within a Hollywood medium that makes something that's supposed to have some element of success and comfort. And he's like, I don't know how you make a movie about, the worst human atrocity ever committed against people in the history of this planet. I don't know how you make that movie and seriously tell that message while also offering comfort and security. Like that doesn't really do justice to the story. So I think that was his perspective on, and that's, like I said, I think that's not so much a perspective of the filmmaking itself. I think he could agree that the filmmaking quality of Schindler's List is very high because there's a lot of very talented people involved in it, but it's more of a philosophical view of things. So I think people that have that kind of voice are necessary, at least so it's a good mirror to have, to bounce.
Yeah, and he's especially, being part of the Monty Python crew. Those are all extremely intelligent guys, and so whether you agree with him or not on some of his opinions, like he's a very smart man, and clearly very outspoken with some of his views. But I love him. I think he's awesome. Big fan of his films. 12 Monkeys is another one that I think is so great. But Brazil is one that I've known about for pretty much my whole life because I remember we always had this on VHS. I've since have upgraded to Blu-ray, but this was one of my parents' favorite films. And this is one that my mom, for all this time I've been doing this talk, she kept saying, when are you going to do Brazil? So
it finally surprises me
doing Brazil.
that this is one of your mom's favorite movies.
Loves this movie. Yeah, she thinks this is amazing. So this movie came out in 1985. A bureaucrat in a dystopic society becomes an enemy of the state as he pursues the woman of his dreams. Jonathan Pryce is the guy I was thinking of. Robert De Niro is also in this. Ian Holm, Bob Hoskins. You'll see some other Monty Python people like Michael Palin is in this. I remember him being pretty hysterical. This was nominated for 2 Oscars, Best Original Screenplay and Best Art Direction. Did not win, but was nominated. But this movie, it's crazy. It's this, especially coming out in the 80s. There's so much that talks about with technology of just kind of predicting how things are going to be in the next couple of decades of from terrorist attacks to plastic surgery to computers taking over our lives. There's a lot in this film.
I feel like I always used to associate this movie with 1984, even though there was a film adaptation of 1984 from the same time that I should be associating with the novel. But for some reason, after I read that book and I saw this movie, somehow they became tangled together in my brain. And I still don't know exactly why. But, I'll revisit it today and see if I see any shades of that in there that cause that connection to still exist upstairs for me.
This movie is available to rent. I know this used to be on Criterion, I think, recently, but we didn't get it in time for our calendar.
Ah,
So it is able to rent unless you own it on Blu-ray, like I do. Yeah, I think this, from what I remember, how long is this movie? I think it's pretty long.
it's not
It,
too long.
oh yeah, just a little, just 2 hours and 12 minutes. For some reason, I was thinking it was like a 3 hour movie. It's not.
No.
So no, I don't think you need to plan your life around watching this film to make room for it. Yeah, but really fun. Looking forward to. It's been God. It's probably been at least probably maybe a good 15 years since I've seen this movie. I know.
Wow.
Again, I own it on Blu-ray, but I haven't watched it since it was just one I was replacing or VHS copy. I think I saw it somewhere pretty cheap, and I was like, I'm getting this. We need to get
Do
rid of
you
our
have
VHS
that
copy.
Criterion
I
3 disc
don't.
special edition
I
of it
don't.
that was like a prized possession of every like cool 20 something in my circle for a long, like when I worked at
Wasn't that
Borders,
cool?
everybody that I worked, like you were like nobody if you didn't love this movie. Like if you weren't cool if you didn't love this movie. So like everybody had it. And so when that Criterion collection came out, it was like, oh, employee discount to the rescue, kind of moment.
Contrast, do you
You
have
have
the
an account.
criteria?
I figured he would. But yeah, we used to actually have a house account at Borders, so we got like $300 that we could charge things to. And then every month, if you were a full-time employee, you got a store credit of $30, and it would just be added to your account. And then eventually they just changed it, and they would give you a gift card of $30 every month for if you were a full-time employee. But before that, you could like build up this account to like thousands of dollars and just charge things to it, and you only would owe the original $300 on it ever, because you could just keep saving up the credits they gave you every month. So there were people who'd worked there for like 15 years and they had huge house accounts. So whenever they wanted something, they'd be like, they get their discount on it, and they would just walk up to the front of the counter and they wouldn't pay a cent, and then they could go home with it. I used that account for Criterion DVDs quite a lot. That's what gave me a resource to sell from to get through college and eat. But someday, if you discover that you love this movie like a lot more now after you watch it now, save up for that special edition
I
from
guess. I guess. Sounds like a must-have.
because it is a must-have if you love this movie.
So please watch this movie. Again, just available to rent. As far as I could tell, I mean, I looked at, I think, most of the streaming things that I have, and I don't think it was anywhere. But anyway, you might have to rent it. Please watch it and join us for our discussion of it after the fact. And then tomorrow is our final Woman Crush Wednesday for the month. We are talking about Italian actress Anna Magnani and her Oscar-winning role in The Rose Tattoo, which I don't think I've seen. And I, as an actress, I want to watch every single Oscar-winning role for men too, especially for actresses. So looking forward to it. Yeah, so enjoy Brazil and join us tomorrow for Anna Magnani. And we'll see you guys tomorrow, same time, same place. Check out our Patreon. Put the link in the comments. And yeah, we'll see you guys tomorrow.